fibromyalgia, GI disorders, hepatitis.
The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Oh, yeah, good day, Tokers and Tokettes, and welcome. It is Thursday, September 13th, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. We're going to have a really good time tonight. All sorts of great guests coming up on the show. We're going to get behind the headlines with some news out of Colorado with the co-director of the Amendment 64 legalization campaign, Mason Tvert, joins us just in a few minutes. And then after that, 20 after, it's Groovin' Thursday, not arguing. It's Groovin' Thursday. And today I got some music from a friend of mine, one of the Hoodie Monks out in Japan. So we're going to get some Japanese hip-hop. The song is called Rollin' Easy. At half past, we're going to talk with Patrick Nightingale from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition in our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment. And we're hoping that Jim Clark makes it in at the end of the show today. He's running for one of the House districts here in the state of Oregon. If not, we'll have time for a little radical rant on the New York City soda ban. But before we get to all of that, there's so much coming up in the news that we got to get to our news editor, Carrie Gallagher, who's waiting in our virtual studio in Grass Valley, Oregon. How you doing, Carrie?
Good, Russ. That I am. I'm waiting here to give you the news.
Yeah, so what do we have in the headlines today?
Well, today we're going to talk about some dispensary raids that happened in Arizona this week. Plus, we're going to talk about the governor of Colorado who's finally come off the fence about legalization, a celebrity who is crediting marijuana with helping him get better, and we're going to go to Massachusetts where the No on 3 people made a pretty big mistake.
You know, I can't wait to tell that story, Carrie. My average daily requirement of Schadenfreude, I think I've gotten it for the next 3 weeks off of this one story alone, folks. You got to stay tuned for this. We've told stupid stoner stories in the past. This is a stupid prohibitionist story. So
yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, we can't wait to get to that. Also, in hour 2, Toker Talk Radio will take your calls at 971-533-7111. And remember, we now have a voicemail system there. So even when we're on replays or not on the air, if you want to call up and leave a shout out or a question or a comment for the Marijuana Nation, just dial 971-533-7111. Any time of day, 24 hours, it is available. And we will play selected clips from our listeners on future shows. Check out our website at radicalruss.com. Sign up for your VIP membership today. Got some special premium content, a story that you can only get as a premium member, and more fun downloads for premium members. Check it out at radicalruss.com. Help support independent marijuana media. We'll be right back after this.
It's simply business. It's simply business. It's simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
It's simply business. It's simply business. simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business. It's simply business, you know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
We're not looking to end beer summits at the White House or change the way people behave on the campaign trail. We just believe adults, in the privacy of their homes, should be allowed to use marijuana instead of alcohol if that's what they prefer. 40 years ago, our government launched an irrational war on marijuana for reasons unrelated to the actual and limited harms of the substance. It's time for a more sensible approach. It's time to regulate marijuana. Paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana like
Grab-a-dab-a-goo! The Russ Belville Show.
I'm not very good at singing songs, but here's a try.
According to lifelong pot smoker and rocket scientist Carl Sagan, making apple pies from scratch is extremely difficult.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe.
Radical Russ and the Rolla J Studios crew will be right back after these messages.
A morning filled with 400 billion suns. The rising of the Milky Way. Cosmos is full beyond measure.
Now it's time for our 420 headline news with our news editor, Carrie Gallagher.
The governor of Colorado has come off the fence about Amendment 64, a citizen effort to legalize and regulate marijuana in the state of Colorado. Governor John Hickenlooper made the announcement this week that he is opposing Amendment 64 on the November 6th ballot. In a statement, the governor said that Colorado is known for many great things, but marijuana should not be one of them. He called Amendment 64 the wrong message to children and said that if passed, it could increase the number of children using drugs and detract from the efforts to make Colorado the healthiest state in the nation. Hickenlooper said that the federal government has been clear that they will not turn a blind eye to states trying to legalize the Schedule I substance. Mason Tvert, one of the directors for the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana like alcohol, called the remarks hypocritical, pointing out that Governor Hickenlooper made a personal fortune selling alcohol to Coloradans. Hickenlooper has owned several pubs and founded the Weinkopp Brewing Company in 1988, home of the very popular Beer Drinker of the Year competition. 3 medical marijuana businesses were raided yesterday in Arizona, and 8 people were arrested at what police are calling medical marijuana certification centers. 2 linked storefronts in Tucson and 1 in Casa Grande were swarmed with police teams on Wednesday, where they made those arrests and collected 10 pounds of high-grade marijuana. Police say the operators of the Shop 420 locations were illegally growing and selling marijuana from the stores. Police also confiscated 2 pounds of medicated candy, a first for the Tucson Police Department. According to the website for the Shop 420 locations, the centers provide medical evaluations for medical marijuana ID cards, along with selling marijuana cultivation supplies and providing growing classes. The website says that they will help patients find caregivers to grow their medical marijuana, but the site does not mention anything about medical marijuana sales. And TV icon in Dallas and I Dream of Jeannie superstar Larry Hagman has credited marijuana as saving his life after liver cancer. Hagman, who is now 80, said that marijuana is much better than alcohol and tobacco and hasn't killed anyone. He said that it was alcohol that nearly took his life and resulted in liver failure. He had a liver transplant to save his life in 1995. He had a new cancer battle last year when he was diagnosed and treated for throat cancer. Hagman admits to a long battle with alcohol and tobacco. He revealed that he was drunk during most of the filming of both I Dream of Jeannie, where he played an astronaut, and the TV program Dallas, where he played a millionaire villain. He told the BBC that growing up, all of his heroes smoked and drank. With his drinking years now far behind him, he says it was marijuana that he views as medicine that he used after devastating chemotherapy to bring back his appetite. And the group opposed to a medical marijuana initiative that will be appearing on the Massachusetts ballot made a serious yet hilarious blunder in the upcoming voter's guide. The Secretary of State creates the voter's guide to inform voters of the pros and cons of the initiatives that made the ballot. The committee that opposes allowing medical marijuana in the state of Massachusetts had submitted a web address for the guide without actually registering it. Vote No on question3.org was supposed to let voters know where they could get more information on the reasons to oppose legal medical marijuana, but since they hadn't yet secured that site, someone else swooped in and bought it on Tuesday. It is now the home to a well-done spoof site that declares that marijuana is the gateway to Twinkie addiction. Kevin Sabet, the former White House administrative advisor on drug policy and a spokesman for the No on 3 Question Committee, called the mistake upsetting. The group sent out a press release today saying that the proponents of medical marijuana were using underhanded efforts, but in the end, Sabet admitted that the committee just made a mistake. MA Vote No on question3.com was quickly registered and will be correctly listed on the state secretary's website, but the spoof web address was sent out to every household in the state in the voter's guide. The Committee for Compassionate Medicine has released a statement saying they had nothing to do with the spoof site. And this is Carrie Gallagher for the Russ Belville Show, and that's your 420 Hemp Headline News for Thursday, September 13th, 2012.
Thank you, Carrie. And we'll get a little bit more behind the headlines on that Colorado news. Coming up next, we've got Mason Tvert, the co-director of the Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol campaign for Amendment 64, joining us by telephone from Denver, Colorado. We'll get him on the line right after this break. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
And now, a message from former President George W. Bush to remind the American people of our responsibility in our nation's war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
That's right, America, use less drugs. Put down the Prozac, the Vioxx, and the Levitra, and turn to the herb. Use less drugs. Our national policy is no longer just say no, it's now just slow down.
You get me too high. I overanalyze. If you've ever been too high, then you can.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 13 after the hour, and we're going to get behind the headlines now with our next guest. Joining us by telephone from Denver, Colorado is Mason Tvert, the co-director of Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, the Amendment 64 campaign. Mason, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Russ.
Hey, we got a couple of things to get to real quickly here. First of all, a story that we covered earlier in the week had to do with your Blue Book and being able to get 3 key messages, that were taken out of the Blue Book. This is the voter's guide. Apparently there was a decision on that today. Can you tell us what happened and what's next for the campaign with regard to the Blue Book?
At this point, we are essentially done with the Blue Book as of now. They're printing it, they're sending it out. And this is the same type of situation that we've seen for years, where the federal government, the state government, local governments are withholding information from the public about marijuana.
Yeah, now...
So, it just means that we have to work even harder to get the message out there, get these arguments out there, and a lot of people are upset, and we hope to really build momentum off of that and get people more active.
Yeah, in particular, some of the lines that were stricken from the argument were marijuana is objectively less harmful than alcohol, the consequences of a marijuana offense are too severe, and law enforcement resources would be better spent on more serious crimes. And it seems like the public's on your side. The latest poll I saw was 61% in favor, 27% opposition. So do you think this Blue Book thing is just, a battle that really doesn't need to be won at this point?
Yeah, it'd be nice to ensure that these types of arguments are included in the Blue Book. It is currently grossly unfair. There's 75% more words in the arguments against than the arguments for, which is absurd to any, rational person. But ultimately, we need to talk to voters. We need to really have conversations with them. The Blue Book, it is important, but what's going to be more important is ensuring we're reaching them, whether it's in their community, at events, or door-to-door, by phone. We really need to step that up, and we are working on that, and we feel that we can counter any damage that might have been done by the Blue Book.
The other story coming out of Colorado that garnered a lot of attention, and I saw some great quotes from you on this, is your governor, John Hickenlooper, who's been kind of, neutral or on the fence or avoiding the subject, but this week came out in a statement saying, quote, Colorado is known for many great things. Marijuana should not be one of them. Amendment 64 has the potential to increase the number of children using drugs and would detract from efforts to make Colorado the healthiest state in the nation. It sends the wrong message to kids that drugs are okay. End quote. So, Mason, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is incredibly hypocritical. This is a governor who really made a living for years selling beer. He had a brew pub. He had his hand in several restaurants and bars and whatnot. And it's unfortunate that he's pushing this message that somehow it's okay to promote Colorado as one of the beer capitals of the world, which he does every year with the Great American Beer Festival. Right. It's the largest beer event in the country. And then, of course, he recently criticized Obama for not producing good enough beer at the White House. So, it's obviously hypocritical to just about anyone who looks at it. And ultimately, we can take solace in the fact that Hickenlooper, as mayor of Denver, opposed our initiative in 2005 to remove penalties for adult marijuana possession, which won.
Yeah.
And he also opposed our initiative in 2007 to make marijuana the lowest priority, and that won. So, we're upset to see that he's taken this position, but at the same time, it's hardly unexpected, and we think voters are smart enough to see through it.
Well, and of course, Denver is home to Coors Field for the Colorado Rockies baseball team. And a look at the statistics, if the governor's really worried about the message it sends to children. I took a look at the 2008-2009 National Survey on Drug Use and Health state estimates and found Colorado second only to Montana in children between the ages of 12 and 17 who are drinking alcohol monthly. 20% of Colorado children are drinking alcohol monthly compared to 14.6% of that age group nationwide. So if there's messages to be sent here, I think Governor Hickenlooper is sending the wrong one.
Yeah, absolutely, and he clearly has his political motivations. I think that it's more of a not on my watch type of reaction than it is a very adamant fighting words type of action. So hopefully this doesn't mean that he's going to be spending much time on this, as we had seen in the past with our former Governor Bill Owens. But what it comes down to is voters have been hearing from elected officials like him throughout their lives that marijuana is a bad thing that shouldn't be legal, yet we continue to see support grow. So, I don't expect people who otherwise think marijuana should be legal to be swayed by this.
All right. Well, Mason Tvert, you're doing great work out there with Amendment 64. The website is regulatemarijuana.org. Get the information out there. Get your donations to them. Let's help push this over the finish line and get Colorado to have legal marijuana for adults 21 and over. It's about time. Mason, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Russ.
All right, folks. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about these issues as well. We've got Patrick Nightingale coming up from LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, will be joining us in our segment called Cops Say Legalize Drugs. Then, at the end of the hour, we've got a guest in the studio. We've got Jim Clark, who's in the studio sitting here watching the show, and we'll be talking to him a little bit later on his campaign running for the Oregon House of Representatives, and how he would be one of the first medical marijuana patients to be in the Oregon House, at least that we know of. Plus, we'll take your calls in hour 2 at 971-533-7111 in our Toker Talk Radio. But first, we've got to get to some sponsor messages and take a break ourselves, because you know what time it is. That's right. It's 20 after the hour, and according to union rules here, we must take a break at 20 after. Happy 420 to our friends in Atlanta, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. Be right back.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Dear Mom, when I was in college, I used to drink a lot. It was kind of crazy. But now that I'm older, I prefer to use marijuana. It's less harmful to my body, I don't get hungover, and honestly, I feel safer around marijuana users. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk. I love you.
Man, is that the reefer man?
That's the reefer man.
I believe he's losing his mind.
I think he's lost his mind.
This is a Russ Belville Show news alert. Whatever you do, don't smoke pot. You don't want to turn out to be a loser, like Olympian Michael Phelps, actor Jack Nicholson,
singer Miley Cyrus, rocket scientist Dr. Carl Sagan, pop star Rihanna, actress Cameron Diaz, country legend Willie Nelson, President Barack Obama, Cy Young pitcher Tim Lincecum.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man? If he says he swam to China and he sells you South Carolina, then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
And over 100 million other Americans.
Have you ever met funny reefer man? If he says he walks the ocean anytime he takes a notion, then you know you're talking to the reefer man.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Groovin' Thursday, featuring rap, hip-hop, soul, and funk music. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 and a half after the hour. Hope you had yourself a good break, and I hope you're rolling easy out there. That's the name of our tune today for Groovin' Thursday, featuring an artist that I met through the internets. And you know, one of the best things about doing this job is getting to meet people from the cannabis community from all over the world. Gomyo Separik hails out of Japan and is a part of a collective there called the Hoodie Monks. They are Buddhist hip-hop artists. It's the coolest thing, and I've played some of their music before. You may have heard a song called Hannibus in replay on our Daily Toker Tunes. That's one of the tunes he sent me, God, it must have been a couple years ago. And so I got to thinking about Japan and Gomyo and Taku and a few of my other 420 friends, or as they call them, 831 friends. For some reason, 420 in Japanese is 831. I don't know why. But anyway, some of our 831 friends out there in Japan. And so I saw a tweet come across from Gomyo mentioning that he had a new album that was coming out. And I said, well, hey, send us some tracks from that. We'll get you some play. He's on ReverbNation.com. So if you go to the ReverbNation.com website, type in Gomyo, Gomyo, you should be able to find his tunes. A lot of Japanese mixed with English, kind of a hip-hop feel, and a lot of references to the healing herb. Japan has got a very, very restrictive marijuana law. Very few people in the Japanese public understand much about marijuana issues. So people that are fighting for legalization and fighting for medical use of marijuana in Japan face a real uphill battle there. So anything you can do, if you know people in Japan, if you know anybody that's headed there, do what you can to help spread this message and support those people coming out of Japan, coming out of Asia, trying to spread our message. We've got normal chapters, SSDP chapters. We got all sorts of different activists in Europe and increasingly in Latin America and South America. We really need to reach out to Africa and Asia and start getting this message spread there as well. That's enough for me. Let's go to the Hoodie Monks here. Gomyo himself with Rollin' Easy featuring Mess. Thanks, Gomyo, for the track. We appreciate it. You get this and more downloads from our Daily Toker Tunes archive at RadicalRuss.com.
When I need to eat, I do the takohatsu. Keeps me humble, cause I got to keep up my flow. I'm on the go. I'll write the haiku just like my show. Enter this rap at the sound of the tone, and you sit down and fix a bowl of udon. Now my bowl is empty, so I reach into my pouch. Pull out a little green, I'm ready to bounce. Then I'm just about to laugh when my friend grabs my arm. Squeeze it tight, sound the alarm. He said, hold up, wait up, don't do that, stop. I said, why? He said, you come out. Ah, shit. Now here we come. The copy grabbed my arm and said he charged me with the felony. I smacked him on his chin and then I told him go to hell. And he pulled out his gun and tried to whack me in the face, which was good cause he blew his fucking face. Then I got Oscar free and started roaming around the town again until I saw the cop who said they gonna bring me down again. He said they gonna send me up, they gonna send me big and say get off my back because my lawyer got you ticket fingers not flowing out. Nothing you could do. I'm all about blue like an old man Joe shit. I'm so meticulous. I got you up with this. You really shouldn't do with this because you couldn't fuck with it. You know I got you stuck with it. You be shit out of luck with it. So let your anger go. Sit back, listen to my fucking time battle that I came here for. It's a hip hop show by G-O-N-Y-O. Yama Underground coming at you with the sound that can only be found when you smoke about a pound. We've been around this town. Well, then a time or two. Seen some shit that you haven't seen, just some shit that you didn't do. And this is how we rollin', the only fun crew. They Okayama born and bred and Hoodie Monks too. So when we rollin' that, we always got a marker or a can. You catch a throw up over tags. Fuck the man. He's only here to lock us up and take our money. Protecting shit, don't make me laugh, this shit is funny. Private prisons, business going overlords, getting rich to eagle-eyes and do this up, but we can stretch the edge for the healing herb. The sacred plant, the gift that God is given. Count the legions, find the divine number, lucky 7. Run up and change the law, something we all should have done because American and Japanese roots are made of hemp. 10 years and rolling, we still got it going. Decent rapping, smoking, can and mic controlling, only ball.
新車から身を乗り出し彼はパフェの中身を取り出しスプーン
been smoking, cat and mic controlling
That's Gomeo and the Hoodie Monks. Get your download at RadicalRuss.com. When we come back, Leap's Patrick Nightingale.
Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information. Do you want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind, liberate your mind. Liberate your mind, liberate your mind. That's what you got to do. Liberate your mind.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message. Cops say legalize drugs.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And joining us for our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment today, we have Patrick Nightingale, who's a speaker for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Russ. It's a pleasure to speak with you again.
Yes, nice to have you back on. And for those folks that didn't hear you in our first interview, remind folks how you got involved with LEAP. What's your background in law enforcement?
I was a former prosecutor with the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office from 1996 until 2002. In 2010, Jack Cole came to Pittsburgh to testify at a hearing that we had on our medicinal marijuana bill. And when he learned my background, invited me to become a speaker for Western Pennsylvania for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And I've been doing interviews and presentations for him ever since.
All right. So in your time working with LEAP, as you go out and you spread this message to crowds, what I love about LEAP is you're going out to not the choir. You're going out to, the general public out there. What do you find are the things they're most reticent about when it comes to our message of drug legalization?
Well, the public, generally speaking, they're worried about the sky falling in. Oh my God, if drugs are legalized, then, every kid out there is going to be, shooting heroin, smoking crack cocaine, and rolling big fat blunts and not going to school. And you have to get past that initial resistance, that initial suggestion that, oh, I am closed to this 100%, don't even bring this up to me, and start to show people the numbers of the war on drugs and the cost of the war on drugs and the utter futility of the war on drugs. And the fact that drugs, for example, heroin, is far more powerful now, far cheaper, and far more readily available than it was in 1970 when Nixon decided that we had to launch a war on drugs.
Yeah, and when you make these arguments, the economic argument, the harms argument, is there any one argument that wins more people over? I seem to think that lately it's been the economic argument. People just see we can't afford what we're doing.
Yeah, the economic argument is winning over political conservatives, people who may self-identify as Republican or fiscally conservative, politically conservative, because they ask the question, wait a second, if we're spending $40 billion, $50 billion, $60 billion, what are we getting for our investment? And the only thing that we are getting for our investment is the world's largest prison population per capita.
Yeah.
A much larger prison population than Russia, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia. I mean, North Korea probably beats us, but, they're not releasing their statistics. But outside of that, the war on drugs has resulted in the United States of America, the beacon of freedom and democracy, having the highest rate of per capita incarceration of any country in this world.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have got to do better at. That cannot possibly stand.
Absolutely. And not just, largest per capita, but largest overall, period. Even more so, more overall people than China with 4 times the population we have? It's insane.
Exactly.
So Patrick, working in the legal system with regard to these charges for drugs, a lot of times when we talk, when we hear from the prohibitionists out there, they will say that we're really not locking people up and prosecuting them for drugs. It just happens that drugs is one of the crimes we catch them for, and then we catch them for much worse crimes. Drugs themselves aren't so much what we're locking people up for. It's just an ancillary crime. What does your experience tell you?
I mean, that's a self-fulfilling argument. If you have to acquire cannabis or heroin or crack cocaine or whatever on the black market, you are necessarily becoming involved in criminality. And when you have people involved in the money of the narcotics trade, the vast amount of money of the narcotics trade, and their willingness to go to any extent whatsoever to preserve their ability to make income, then yes, you're going to have very violent crime associated with the narcotics trade. You're going to have home invasions, robberies, rapes, any wide variety of violent antisocial crime that goes hand in hand with the war on drugs. The problem is that this type of crime was created by the war on drugs. There are no violent street gangs who are going to be shooting each other up in Pittsburgh or in Seattle or in Oregon or anywhere else if there's no money to be made from peddling narcotics. They're not shooting each other up because they're fighting over the right to peddle illegally manufactured alcohol. Give us the ability to tax and regulate, and a very large amount of this violent street crime that is solely and exclusively associated with the profits from the narcotics trade will start to go away, and police officers will be able to start to make a difference in those communities again.
Speaking with Patrick Nightingale from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, working out there in Western Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, based out of Pittsburgh primarily.
Fantastic. And, as we talk about this, one of the audiences that we have to win over are folks that have a moral issue with drug use, where they see it as a sin, they see it as a failing, a weakness, however, a disease, an addiction. And some of them can be brought over with arguments about harm reduction. Let's reduce the harms, clean needles for addicts, for example. But they still come at it with the perspective that drug use itself must be eliminated somehow. How do you see LEAP's message and the message of ending drug prohibition as one that embraces the fact that the idea that people should be able to responsibly use drugs, that not all use is abuse?
Yeah, the LEAP response is exactly what you just described, the harm reduction approach, and emphasize harm reduction education. LEAP does not encourage drug use. LEAP is not made up of former police officers and prosecutors and judges who suddenly found, the one wide and wonderful world of narcotics addiction and abuse. But what LEAP is saying is that we understand that there's a problem with addiction. We understand that people suffer and families suffer from addiction. But treating it through prosecution, through law enforcement, has not worked. And in fact, it has caused more harm than it could possibly have helped. So let's stop putting all this money into law enforcement. Let's redirect this money into treatment and redirect this money into education. Give addicts who need help a fighting chance. Today, if an addict really wants an inpatient program and they don't have insurance, guess what? No inpatient program. What's this person going to do? They're just going to continue to abuse until eventually they get arrested and now become part of the system and another burden on the system. It makes no sense whatsoever. Treat these people humanely, with compassion. Treat them for the disease of addiction that they have, but don't treat them like criminals.
In talking about the end of drug prohibition and moving on in a regulated system from that point forward, it seems to me like there's two discussions to be had. One is that discussion around marijuana, and the other one is the discussion around other drugs, and not necessarily casting the other drugs as being more harmful or dangerous, but just in the simple fact that marijuana is something that the average person with a little bit of work can manufacture, whereas cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, most of those can't be manufactured. And of course, meth is really dangerous and difficult to manufacture. So in having this discussion about where we'd move forward with drug legalization, how does the ability of a person to be able to produce it themselves change the argument? And what would you say to people that are afraid of, well, marijuana is so easy to grow, it'll be impossible to keep away from the kids?
Well, you're touching on two things right there. What LEAP believes in is regulation and regulated distribution. So addicts are not facing, spiked or altered heroin or something that will accidentally kill them because they're unaware of the potency or some other tainting or adultering that might go on with that. Now, when we're talking about cannabis, we're not so much worried about tainted cannabis getting into the market, though that is somewhat of a concern. But yes, it is an issue that if what we're proposing is taxing and regulating, someone comes back and says, well, how do you regulate something that can be grown in the backyard, in the basement? And the bottom line is it's a plant, and we simply do not believe that anyone should be subject to prosecution, whether it's produced on their own or acquired through some type of dispensary system.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we face in trying to make this discussion with other folks is there's no comparison for them in reality for them to know what we're asking about. Marijuana's never been legal, heroin's never been legal, and the only comparison they can come back to is alcohol. And they think back to their own example of being a young teenager and acquiring alcohol by getting the guy to buy you some alcohol at the store. And I've heard this from some people who are afraid of legalization. They say, yeah, what's going to stop kids from, just sneaking into their dad's closet and getting some buds and selling it to their friends, or having a older teenage friend or an older 21, 22-year-old friend go and buy it at the store? What's the response that we give to audiences in that case?
Well, you're exactly right. There's nothing that would prevent a teen in that situation from contacting an older person or sitting outside the dispensary with an extra $10 bill or whatever the case may be. But the reality is that drugs today are widely available in every American high school. Here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, some of our best schools, Mount Lebanon, Bethel Park, Upper St. Clair, are racked with heroin and OxyContin addiction problems in their schools. These kids can acquire illegal and very powerful and very addictive narcotics easier than they can acquire alcohol, where they have to go through that middle person. You have to get an older person, an adult, to go into that store and buy alcohol for you. And if the adult does that, they're committing a misdemeanor offense for which they can be prosecuted and possibly jailed. So there's some disincentive built in for that adult to go into the liquor store to buy a bottle of liquor for a 15-year-old kid. But that 15-year-old kid can walk down the hallway of his school and meet another 15-year-old kid and acquire heroin, OxyContin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, anything. And when you look at it in that fashion, that prohibition has resulted in narcotics being more readily available to our children today than alcohol is. We start with that discussion. And we continue with, hey, if a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old wants to buy pot and give it to that 14 or 15-year-old, they're going to get prosecuted, just like if they bought a six-pack of beer or a case of liquor or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. Patrick Nightingale from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Folks, the website, you can get there a couple ways. There's copssaylegalizedrugs.com, or if you're into short typing, it's leap.cc, leap.cc, and you can book a speaker just like Patrick in your area who can come out to your local Rotary Club, your PTA meeting, whatever it might be, and speak to the truth about ending adult prohibition on drugs. And Patrick, thanks for joining us again on the show. We really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you very much, Russ. I appreciate your support. All
right. And when we come back, we've got live guest in the studio, Jim Clark, running for Oregon House of Representatives. We'll get the perspectives of a medical marijuana patient and patient activist fighting for our medical marijuana program and some sensibility in our politics out here. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back after this.
to the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Normal Show Live reminds you to never consent to a search. If you're holding and you consent, in most states you will be arrested immediately and you will go to jail. If you don't consent to a search, police may try to intimidate you by threatening to bring in drug-sniffing dogs or try to fool you by saying things will go easier if you consent. Yeah, easier for them, sure. Stand your ground, refuse the search, and ask the officer if you're free to go. If they still detain you and eventually find your contraband, you'll be no more busted than if you had allowed the search. But by refusing the search, your attorney has a chance to win your acquittal before a judge. If you consent to the search, your attorney's hands are tied. You can find a list of Normal Legal Committee attorneys specializing in marijuana cases by visiting the Find a Lawyer link at normal.org.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Our marijuana laws are terribly unfair, and they make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges, and we are unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They are average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. And it's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour, and in today's activist agenda, we're very happy to be joined live in studio by Jim Clark, who's running for Oregon House District Number 1. Jim, welcome to the show.
Russ, good to see you again. What's it been since Patients Out of Time last April?
I guess, was that November or?
Was it April?
That was a long time ago, whatever it was. Yeah, we saw each other. We have to go all the way to Arizona to run into each other. That's right. It's kind of funny. Right. But like I said, Jim is running for the Oregon House of Representatives, and you're also still on the advisory committee, aren't you, ACMM?
Yes, I am. I'm the vice chair.
Vice chair of the advisory committee on medical marijuana, which, as far as I'm aware, is unique among the medical marijuana states, isn't it, as far as having this committee?
I'm not sure if any other of the states have written into their laws an advisory committee or not. I know the state of Idaho, a couple different people who have tried to get medical marijuana going there have asked some of us here in Oregon for advice, and basically the best advice we gave them was to have an advisory committee on it, so that they have people with real experience talking about what they know.
Yeah, and so the way it's supposed to work here in Oregon, we've got this advisory committee on medical marijuana. 11-member committee, is it?
It is.
Okay, 11 members who are patients, patient advocates, growers, and such. And the idea is that the committee advises the state of Oregon on how to run the program, but there's nothing that forces them to take your advice, right?
That's correct. One of the things we hear quite frequently when discussing issues of the program itself is that we advise the program through an appointed assistant attorney general, then runs that by that assistant attorney general as to whether or not it's feasible. And so far in 12 years, we've pretty much been shot down at every corner.
And what are some of the things you're trying to get? You know, the committee is advising, saying, hey, you ought to do this.
Well, we've, for quite some time now, we've been trying to add other conditions, and the forefront would have to be PTSD,
sure,
you know, which we definitely believe is something that's needed it. And yet when the statute was written, there was a small committee put forth to make that choice of what should be another condition that's added, and it's always been off balance, and it's off balance because with the advisory committee, we're all in one way or another experienced in the whatever it is individually, the part of cannabis that we happen to be the most interested or brings it into our lives. With the committee that was formed in the early days to discuss new conditions, some of those people had no experience at all, and so therefore they were basically voting against something that they had no idea what they were even really voting for or against, other than they didn't like it for a superficial reason, such as a social thing when we're dealing with trying to get something medically improved. And so we're trying to do that now, and we're trying to change the complex of that board so that those people that are on that board either have to have that type of experience or training in some sort of cannabis therapeutics, or else, if it comes down to it, they may choose to use one individual to make those determinations, and would like to see them make sure once they have chosen the individual that before they are accepted that they have to be screened or looked at by the advisory committee.
Okay, and the other thing I was wondering is we've the program's been through a lot this past year, most recently and shockingly the raise in fees. We've gone from $100 to $200 for the general patient who's going to register, from $20 to $100 for the indigent patients, and more strict requirements to qualify as an indigent patient, and on top of that, a $50 fee to register a grower. What impact has this had on the program?
Well, it's really had kind of a strange impact to me, because there was a slight dip in the very beginning, and since then the program has actually grown substantially. However, that's because it's kind of like the genie's out of the bottle, and people are understanding how well it works from them and helps them get away from harsher narcotics and stuff like that, which we think is a very positive thing for a person's welfare and health. And so the other part about that too was that the advisory committee is supposed to be statutorily the committee that comes up with the raises and what they're supposed to be through, looking at, we have an actual financial person that looks at the costs of the program. And
the program's never run deficits.
No, as a matter of fact, 2 years into the program, we gave the state of Oregon $904,000 because us and Fish and Game were basically the only two agencies running in the black. Another year or two after that, we gave them another $128,000 or $124,000. Right now, we're actually in our coffers have twice the money that we need to run it, which means it's ripe for another, excuse the term, but raping,
plundering.
But at the same time, the program itself needs to. There's an Oregon agency hiring freeze, but with the amount of money that the Oregon medical marijuana program brings in, they should be using that money to get those people more help them get the cards out faster, do the basic behind-the-scenes work that they have to do. The money's there.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part about it is,
And they shut down the customer service window too, didn't they?
They did shut down the customer service window, and they said that was due to a security thing at the Oregon building. And I used to work in a bank atmosphere myself. We used to get federal shipments of money through armored transport. We called it the Rat Patrol. and they'd bring in basically pallets of brand new money from the federal government.
Wow.
And of course they had armed guards with them, but they had to walk through people on the sidewalk. The actual Oregon building is set up in a way where you can actually go into that building through the basement. And so it's more secure than any bank I've ever been in, whether it was on business or otherwise.
You know, another big piece of news with respect to Oregon's medical marijuana community was the primary victory of Ellen Rosenblum, who seems poised to become our next Attorney General. She even mentioned you in her acceptance. And so can you tell us about the relationship of yourself, ACMM, and the community with the new Attorney General, and does this give you hope for better outcomes in the future?
Well, I really think that her mention was of Jim Gregg.
Jim Gregg, I'm sorry. That's
but
right.
It's okay. Jim Gregg is kind of my campaign manager and very, very helpful person. And but I've met Ellen a couple times now. It's nice and refreshing to have a person in the Attorney General's chair who believes in, you know, when people vote in something, the vote of the people is what counts. But then again, if you look at it, not just is she only the first woman ever in Oregon to be Attorney General, she also was a judge. Most Attorney Generals come from the line of hardline prosecution attorney type things. So she really knows how to judge things, and it's quite obvious that somewhere in her life that probably medicinal cannabis has touched her. So she's already past that blockade of being, you know, drinking too much of the Kool-Aid like our last Attorney General had.
You know, and we've got this Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, recently threw a get-together out there in Eugene.
I was there.
You were there. My wife went out there with a different view and so forth. How did that go, and did we get any words of encouragement there?
Well, I think there's a great word of encouragement there, because not only was she there, but so was Brad Avrakian, who's running for the Labor Commission again.
Right.
And I had never known the correlation between the Commissioner of Labor and the Department of Justice. And in Brad Avrakian's case, ever since the beginning, and even before there was an OMA program, because he was telling me this personally, he was always, you know, in favor of people using it medicinally. But his concern now is that he handles the complaints and stuff from the people who are being discriminated against. And there's a lot of people who, if you just put down that you have a card, that you're not given HUD or Section 8 or any of those other things. And I think he's a person we have to have in there, because a lot of that is going to come to a halt if he's elected, and, you know, any of those type of cases are brought to his attention, which the way everything's going right now, those things are being brought to everybody's attention. That's why I think we're seeing a lot of this effervescing of the government kind of catching on, even though it has been a dozen years.
Yeah, and you know, to me, it's also, I'm so thrilled to be living in an era and in a state where politicians are having to not just consider our vote, but court it, where they're actually, you know, asking questions about how to reach out to our community and how to best serve our needs. And so, you know, people like you and all the activists that have been working so hard on this are a big reason why. Let's give people the information again. It's Jim Clark for the Oregon District 1. Is there a website people can go to help out?
Yeah, it's www.jimclark, the number 4 rep, REP.com.
So that's Jim, KLAHR, number 4 rep.com. And you can help Jim out, help him get elected to the Oregon House. And folks, this is what I'm always talking about how you change things. You get all excited about whoever's running for president, you know, Gary Johnson or, you know, Jill Stein or whoever. But really, where these battles have to happen is us winning at the local level, filling our local city councils, county commissions, and state houses with people that know the truth about cannabis. Jim, you're one of them. Thank you for being here and doing what you're doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Russ.
All right, folks, that's all the time we got here for everybody here at the Russ Belville Show. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
Stick around. Coming up next, Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, where you can be a part of the Marijuana Nation. Let your voice be heard at 971-533-7111, live or by voicemail. Be right back after this.
You grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!